Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Podcast. I'm your guest host, Gary Keller, and this is the place where we lift the curtain on the world of real estate like never before. Every week we sit down with visionaries, pirates, and mavericks. We're here to document, demonstrate, and most importantly, demystify their game-changing models and systems. What secrets propel them to the top? And how are they living their dreams? This is about passion. It's about strategy. But above all, it's about real tangible success. So buckle up and let's dive in as we turn our attention to the man, the myth, the usual host of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Podcast, Mr. Jason Abrams. Jason, welcome to the show.
It is fantastic to be here and bizarre to be in this seat.
Is it my show or is it your show?
It's always yours, but I will...
That's not true. Okay, so welcome to your show, Jason.
It is our show, and we are celebrating our 50th episode today.
Wow, congratulations. That's so awesome. By the way, I've traveled with you, and I've listened to all 50. Some multiple times.
You and my mother might be the only people that can say that. Thank you very much.
Nah, you're doing a great job, my friend. I love listening to it. It's very instructive. You do a great job. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Love it. So let's dive into this. So I'd like to ask you just a real fundamental question. Why the blank did you decide to do a podcast?
You know, it's interesting. You and I spend so much of our time interviewing real estate agents.
We do.
And we document their models.
We do. And Jay.
And Jay. We're all wildly fascinated by it.
We are.
And it's the kind of thing where if you wake up at 2 a.m. thinking about something, I'm thinking about real estate. And when I'm learning about a new model, I'm wildly curious. And I think we realized that documenting models and then sharing them and giving people actionable steps to go take that they can change their life is the highest calling.
It is, isn't it? Amazing. Yeah. And the truth is, where else would they find it? If you weren't doing what you do, where else would they find the truth that way?
In a lot of cases, you can't find it unless you pay an exorbitant amount of money for it. And even then, you're no guaranteed that you're getting the real deal from someone who's actually doing it. And I say that because you can spend 20 hours with somebody unpacking their model and discover at the end that they may not have even had one. Or sometimes you're helping them unpack it in real time and they're getting clear on what it is. And then you hit this moment where it's absolutely beautiful, where you've boiled down 1,000,000 points to the 5 or 6 that matter most. And now you've organized them and someone else can take those and go change their life.
Yeah, everybody follows a model. Some are subconscious and some are conscious, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The interesting thing is the subconscious is really by gut, by feel, like their eyes are shut, but they're feeling their way beautifully through it. And the others who are very purposeful with a very conscious model that they can articulate because it's conscious.
And a lot of them go through the journey where it begins by using the force. And then it becomes more purposeful because at some point, the way that I'm behaving entrepreneurially doesn't then scale. And so I now have to slow down and document, well, what is my magic? And then can I take that magic and make it transformable for other people to use as well?
Okay, so stop the rolls. Anybody that's driving their Tesla right now, just keep driving. You know, we're going to give you a playbook on this conversation.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that there are two kinds of people. There are people that are unconsciously competent, and there are people that are consciously competent. And eventually, they all became the same person. At the highest level, the unconsciously competent, who's just doing it and not necessarily knowing what they're doing, eventually they're going to document it in order to maximize their potential.
That's exactly right. And then there's even this other group that they document what they're doing, and then they also figure out the big life that they want to be living. And now they line up these dominoes such that the business funds the life that they want. And ultimately, these become people that are living, we call life by design. And it's so wildly exciting and freeing to hear them tell their stories.
So I have a big question for you. Is it about the money?
Well, on the cover of the book, as you know, since you wrote it, you wrote that it wasn't. And confession, For the vast majority of my working life, I kind of thought it was, and I ignored that line on the cover. As a matter of fact, I read the cover of the book, quickly open it, and then you get in. And it's crazy because I believe the two most important points are that point on the cover and then the next page, which is who the book is dedicated to. And I skipped through both of them.
So you've now had an epiphany.
I have.
And what's that?
I've been on a journey. And I think the people that listen to this show are all journeyers. I think that's what our audience has in common. And here's what I can tell you. There was a part of my life where I thought if I reached a certain dollar amount, call it $1 million, that suddenly I would feel different or things would be different. And I remember waking up literally the day after I hit that number, and I didn't feel any different. Now, the night before, I was ecstatic. It was an awesome celebration. The next morning, it was just Wednesday. And I said, well, gosh, it must be then I had the wrong number. I'll double it. And when I hit that, then I'm going to feel different. And then that happened, and I had the exact same experience. And we've had so many people on this show talk similarly, but the one that comes to mind is Gino Wickman. Gino Wickman, who's this incredible author who builds EOS, which has 300,000 clients nationwide, sells that business for untold riches, and then wakes up the next day feeling more empty than he did the day before. He then writes the book Shine, which the premise of it is simply that it isn't about the money and it is about the journey, which you've been telling me since I was in my 20s.
It is about the journey. Yeah. Money is good for the good it can do. Nothing wrong with money, by the way. But at a certain point, money fulfills its purpose. And for everyone, that could be a different dollar amount, but it's not as big an amount of money as we imagine it to be when we're not at that number. But everyone has their number when they get to it. Everything in excess of that, it doesn't carry the same power, magic, and allure, right?
Well, so many of the people that we talk to, you've heard me ask the question before, which is, okay, you can pretty much live wherever you want within reason. You can pretty much drive wherever you want. You can go on vacation 3 or 4 times a year, and you can travel however you want. What makes you wake up in the morning at the crack of dawn and go run this team meeting or go and run this open house model? What's keeping you going? And they almost all say the exact same thing. And it's one of two things. It's either because of the people around them, and now they're living through helping those people succeed, which is the most common answer. And then number 2, which is, I loved it then, I love it now, the money was the byproduct.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's leading your best life, right? And money can absolutely, to a certain amount, contribute to that. And then if you're not careful, your life becomes about money, and you look up and you go, you know what? This is not elevating me. So let's switch gears. So thank you for that. My next question is, so what do you think people are doing right? You're now on your 50th episode, right?
Yes.
So sit back for a second and just tell us from your side in the passenger seat, what are some of the things that stand out to you that people are doing that's right?
Whether it was accidental or purposefully, they stumbled into the same thing, which is the lead generation lever that runs their business. They love that thing.
They love it.
They love it. And in truth,
they enjoy it.
Not only do they enjoy it, they'd probably be doing it anyway, even if they were doing something else.
That's so weird.
I flew to Orlando to do a show with Ken Posick. It's a great episode if you haven't listened to it. And I had this epiphany as he's telling me about YouTube. Ken would be a YouTube sensation, and he would be a media company, whether he was selling real estate or tires or insurance or gym memberships. He wakes up living and breathing that thing.
He loves it.
Lori Reeder. I went to Lori and I watched her team meeting. No matter what business Lori is in, the key to that business is the way she kicks off every day. She'd be kicking off every day like that no matter what business she was in.
She would.
I could just keep going, but I think of Jose Medina. When you talk to Jose and he's explaining to you MOFers and he's explaining to you the power of the last mile and how the consumer experiences him, that would be in any business. Whether they're talking about the events they throw, or they're talking about the way that they touch their databases or their VIP groups, at the end of the day, they've all found something that they love doing. So they don't wake up and ask a question, how do I force myself to do an activity I don't enjoy? They wake up and say, I love the activity. I'm going to go do more of that. And their businesses explode in a good way because of it.
Yeah, you can hear that in the podcast. All of a sudden, you can hear the voice go to a second gear when they get to that. So I see exactly what you're saying. What else?
They all started usually with somebody else's model.
They saw someone doing something and they said, I'm going to copy that model.
Absolutely. When you listen to Lacey Bishop and she says, well, I do this open house thing now and it culminates with 300 signs every Sunday and I sell 300 plus houses because of the way I approach my Sundays. And then you say, well, gosh, how did you get there? And she says, well, I heard another agent being interviewed on Agent Mountain with Gary. I took that exact model. And then I said, okay, you're still running it the same way? And she said, no. Over the years, we've made small changes. But fundamentally, they're amazing learners. And they are all too excited to document what someone else is doing. They want you to prove you're having success doing it because they're not interested in your ideas. They're interested in what you've proven. And then over time, they make incremental changes to make it their own. The next thing that they all seem to do is everything matters, but not everything matters equally. And they're all very clear on there might be 31 steps to doing the perfect client event or the perfect open house. And they're going to get all 31 of them done. But they're always clear on which 2 or 3 matter most. And that's where the real experience lies.
Where do you think that clarity comes from? Does it come from accountability to outcome?
I think it's 2 places. Number one, I think it comes from repeated effort. When you do something and you wake up every day for 8 years or something and you hit the same nail, all of a sudden the idiosyncrasies of hitting it become clear to you, even though they're wildly obscured to everybody else.
You begin to understand what matters and doesn't matter.
Exactly right. And then number 2, I think the trials and tribulations of market changes force you to look up and say, okay, something changed in the business. The outcome has now changed. What are the pieces that I need to either augment or that always need to be the same?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Well, times change also, right? I mean, markets change, people change, tastes change, everything changes, which means that you can expect cyclically every 7-10 years or so, you will make changes to how you do something.
Absolutely. What's interesting, though, is with so many of the people that we've interviewed on the show, the markets around them have changed. Interest rates have changed, conditions have changed, political leaders have changed, rules have changed around real estate. They're perennially winning in it. And that's what I find fascinating. You look at a gentleman like a Richard Stone. If you haven't listened to his interview, go do it, because he starts by telling you how real estate is done in the 70s. And here's the thing. He knows as much about that as he does about how it's being done today. What never changed is that he walks from door to door in neighborhoods to generate the leads. So the business changes, but Richard really hasn't.
You mean fundamentally what Richard does hasn't changed, but how he does it, the nuances of that, absolutely.
Yes. And by the way, he went from keeping a list in his pocket of the addresses to now using a CRM and a piece of technology, which allows him to bring his son into the business.
Pretty cool. What else? What do you think?
They're wildly educationally based. And I think that there's a lot of people that might say they are, and they might be, right? But it's how do you demonstrate it? Like, what are the rituals that you've put into your life to actually live an educationally based life? That's different than saying, I value education. And almost all of them are voracious readers. And by the way, that includes listening to books, podcast listeners. When we do the lightning round, you say, well, what's your favorite podcast? I venture to guess the majority of the populace can't name the top 3 podcasts they listen to. Our people can. They can tell you what books they've read. They can tell you what podcasts they're listening to. They can tell you what events they're going to. And they also have models for the way they listen to these things.
Yeah, they keep us on our toes because they're constantly asking us, what are we listening to? What are we reading?
Yes, and that's exactly right. They're living that. And then next, they understand community in a really deep way.
What do you mean?
They all have a community of other mega agents or other real estate agents that are pouring into them. But most importantly, almost across the board, all of them have a coach. I call it a community, and I think of it as the community of them. Because when you look up and say to them, okay, and some of this ends up getting edited out of the show because it's only a 40-minute podcast, but oftentimes I'll say, well, tell me about the 5 people closest to you. And you find out really quickly. Inevitably, they mention a coach. They mention usually a mentor. They mention a business individual who they might not be in deep relationship with, but that they watch from afar and they model some of their actions over. And then they usually talk about the 2 or 3 people in their organizations that are closest to them. which is ultimately the last thing. The vast majority of the megas that we interviewed are able to have one or two people in their lives for a long period of time in their business. And this is often that first hire that they may have hired thinking at that time it was an admin. Ultimately, this kind of became the operations person for their life and their business. And for a lot of them, they've been there 10, 15, and 20 years.
They got lucky?
I guess I would have thought that had it happened once or twice. But when you look across the show, it can't be luck if the ones that are succeeding the highest all have the same story. They may have gotten lucky making the hire. They may have grown into being a manager that can keep them there. But luck meets preparedness. A lot of them took CV with us and Leverage Series, and they understood personality and how it shows up at work. They understood the model of having to interview a ton of people to get to the right one. They understood 30, 60, 90. I'm going to help you in your first 90 days, and then I'm going to make a choice. And by the way, a lot of them said, I hired 15 people, got out of business with them quick until I found the one. But here's the connective tissue. Number one, they were hiring to a model and a process. Number two, they were going to keep hiring until they got the right one. They didn't hire one or two. It didn't work out and say, I'm done with that. They were committed to getting it right.
What comes to my mind listening to you about this is, and I've listened to every episode, they all seem to know their numbers.
So well.
So well. Do they have cheat sheets? Do they have these big, reams of paper in front of them that they're able to, right? I'm listening to Daniel Dixon and I'm going, oh my gosh, man. How do you know all of that off the top of your head? But I know Daniel, he's not reading anything.
No.
He's telling you exactly how it is.
Well, that's a great example of someone who wakes up wildly curious about the lever that he's chosen. I mean, he worked at an internet lead generation company, selling leads to real estate agents, sees how much money they're making, looks up and says, I'll just go into that business. And so him waking up every day and looking at the numbers, the dials that drive his world is as natural to him as breathing.
So sidebar, if you're not numbers oriented, can you still be successful?
I think it's okay to not be numbers oriented. I don't think it's okay to ignore numbers. Meaning, I think you can probably be successful. You won't be as successful as you could be. And life is about maximizing your potential. And so I think the question will become, what are the 3 or 4 most important numbers to my business? And then being an unmovable object on those numbers.
Yeah. In Bold, we teach life by the numbers, right? The path is in the math. And you said that very well. At the end of the day, when you meet people that are excelling in life, they've made the connection between the level that they can live at and the numbers that they have to track or understand in order to get to that level. And they've made the connection. And you can hear it in the show. When you interview, I'm always curious when the numbers are going to show up. They always show up.
They always show up.
They know their numbers.
They know their numbers.
The other thing that I've observed is they are happy. Tell us the truth. Are they all faking it? Because they seem very happy to me.
No, that's the thing. I laugh because they're really happy. And that doesn't mean that they're happy with every day and every circumstance. That would be fake. But by and large, these are people who have spent a considerable amount of time, over time, figuring out what's important to them, who they are, what they stand for, why they work so hard. It's a question that I think very few people think about. And it's a simple one. Why do you work so hard? And these people, by and large, can answer it. And I found it falls into 2 buckets. The first bucket is I'm running from something. And I think of like a Cody Gibson episode who's running from abject poverty and says, I don't ever want to be there again. And I'm going to run as hard as I can. And he looks up at some point in his life and is running by habit and then reassesses what's important. The other group of people, they went through a slightly different journey where they had the time and the resources to consider what their why is and what's important. And then they build businesses to be able to go and make a difference.
Let's switch gears. So what have you observed or heard that people are doing wrong? What's your observations about that?
Far be it from me to throw stones and say what they're doing wrong, but I will say this. If there is a mistake that I see, it's that they go through spurts where they become either A, disenfranchised, or B, disillusioned, or simply bored. And they go through these spurts where they look up and they don't exactly know what they want. They don't even exactly think and know that something is missing, but familiarity breeds contempt. And they wake up and say, I've had more success than I ever thought I was going to have. I've made more money than I ever really thought I was going to have. I have this incredible thing over here. Now, what's it all about? Where can I go be creative? Where can I go diddle? Is the grass greener somewhere else? And by and large, at least with the ones we've interviewed, they scratched the itch perhaps, and then they end up kind of right back, falling back in love with whatever it was they thought they were running from.
That's a big truth, by the way. It happens to all of us. It really does. I remember in my 20s, right off the bat, Keller Williams is succeeding. And I'm teaching a class, and a student comes out of the audience and says, do you teach other than realtors? And I said, well, I never have. That's interesting. Tell me more. Next thing you know, I'm giving speeches in other cities, flying to other cities, being paid to give talks to the carpet cleaners of America, the landscape architects of America.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And I looked up one day and went, well, what am I doing? I do not want to be traveling around giving speeches to these individuals. I want to be in the real estate business, and this is pulling me away from it. And I killed all the contracts and never did it again.
That's so interesting. I think that's what happens. If there was a second thing, I think sometimes they mistake opportunity for another job. So they look up and say, there's this great opportunity over there. And ultimately, if you said it different, there's another job I can have. You probably would look up and say, well, I wasn't looking for another job, nor do I have the time or inclination to go take it. But the minute you take out the word job and put in opportunity, it becomes this aphrodisiac for entrepreneurs.
Oh my gosh, you have nailed it, by the way. Again, I think maybe we all at some point in our life fall prey to chasing the additional opportunity, right? This idea that if I see it and I see it's possible, I should probably not pass it up. But the challenge is making the shift at some point from I do it to we do it to they do it. And the mistake, if there is one, is they stay too long in the I do it because they haven't spent enough time looking for the they.
Yes, and then learning to lead. There's a difference from what I can tell between succeeding and leading. They're different muscles. And oftentimes with highly successful real estate entrepreneurs, they're succeeding at such a high level, they can throw it on their back and run with it. No matter what happens in the market, they can simply work harder. No matter what happens, they can talk to more people. They can get on the phone and solve the problem. And you realize that they build massive success muscles. Then they switch gears and immediately try leading other people. And you realize it's a completely different muscle set. And you have to master that also.
All right, switch gears again. If you could give advice, if you could give encouragement, if you could give some ounce of wisdom to these individuals that have been so gracious with their time to you, what would that be? What would you say to them? What do you want to say to them?
Across all of the interviews that we've done, they're all brilliant people and they're all happy. The ones that I've talked to after the interview or before the interview or have known over a period of time that seem to have the most joy are the ones that determined which were the most important relationships in their lives and spent purposeful time on those relationships, almost to the point of as purposeful as they were about their businesses. And over time, and we'll see if this plays out, my hypothesis is that over time, those relationships become even more important. And ultimately, the people that can look up and document and be able to explain to me which relationships mattered most, how I nurture those relationships on a daily basis, what I'm hoping to get and give, which is a huge part of being in a relationship, are the ones that I think are living the biggest life.
I agree with that 100%. The challenge that you have is putting boundaries around your time that you give to work, such that you leave space for the relationships that matter most outside of work.
You said that during the episode where we had you and Jay on the hot seat, and you said that constraint is actually a positive thing. And it was a big aha for me, but it makes all the sense in the world that if you limit the amount of time you have to work, but you don't change the outcome numbers. You're forced to be more productive during that time and do things better. This makes sense. If you have an unlimited amount of time, you end up either getting the same number or less. And all of a sudden, your relationships suffer to go with it.
If you don't create boundaries, you start stealing time from the other relationships. So now that hourglass gets smaller and smaller while the hourglass of work gets bigger and bigger. And then the big lie shows up. I was doing all this for you. All of this I did for you. I did this for our relationship. I did it for our family. I promise you, there isn't a family out there that was sitting there going, please go back to work. Please make more money, Dad or Mom, instead of being in the backyard playing with me. I'm so glad you missed my recital because I heard you made an extra sale or got that big listing, and we should go celebrate that. And, I'll celebrate with others that I actually won the championship or whatever.
Yeah, that's the lie.
That's the lie.
And here's the great thing about life, from what I can tell, is that if you look backwards and say, you know what, maybe I haven't been the best steward of my time, or maybe I haven't been in the kind of relationships I want to be in. The great thing about this is no one is keeping score other than you, and you can make that change tomorrow. And across the board on these MREAs, they're all willing to bring new habits into their life. What I can tell, they're unwilling to bring in a habit sporadically. They're going to bring in a habit and they're going to make sure that it gets done, and they're going to have the 2 or 3 things that matter most. And then they're going to get that in their life, and then they're going to look up and make a new one. And that's kind of how they keep growing.
Yeah. I think that I would, if you reframed the question back to me, I would say choose your role models carefully.
Pick your prophets.
Pick your prophets. Be very, very careful, right? If you looked at the richest people in the world, if you look closer, you will also see a lot of unhappiness. Now, why? And you should ask that question. Why are they unhappy? You have all the money. Why aren't you happy? And be sure you answer that question before you seek to become them.
When I hear you say that, you came up with the most simple, elegant question for happiness. I would trade happiness for blank. Now fill in the blank. And for maybe some of them, they trade happiness for money. But the truth is, if you really thought about it, you'd never make that trade.
No, that's right. No, 100% that's right. So Jason, why do you every Thursday release the notes?
So glad you asked. I think we're the only podcast that does that. I know we're the only one within the real estate space. And we do it for 3 reasons. Number one, there's an element of entertainment to the show, but I wanted everyone that listens to it to be able to take something and put it into action in their life. Number 2, when we came up with the idea of making a podcast, you told me, you said, go study and read every book on podcasts, then come back and show me a 1-page model of what this show is going to be. That may have been the best advice I had ever gotten, because I learned so much. And one of the things I learned was that the most listened to podcasts outside of the 4 or 5 hour diatribes are 40-minute podcasts, because people spend 20 minutes in the car on the way to and from. And I figured if the majority of the audience is in the car, they can't take notes, which is why we take the notes. And then the third thing, and we get emails every single day, and now they're coming in from all over the world, of people who say, I'm running so-and-so's play and my life has changed. And that has been the greatest honor and the greatest surprise and the greatest gift.
Yeah, I think the gift to you is it makes your questions more precise, because you know at the end of it, you're going to have to answer the questions. And if you didn't ask the questions, then you can't answer the question of what's the model, because you didn't get enough answers to do it. So it also brings immense discipline, which, by the way, I'm complimenting you. That shows up. You can tell that you're on a mission to be able to make sense of it all. Thus, the questions are leading to that.
Yes.
Which creates a disciplined interview process, which, again, I don't know if anybody ever thought about it that way, but it's why the interview makes sense. When you take it and edit it, you can see what's happening. You're headed towards an outcome outside of just a good listen.
That's exactly right. I wanted it to be actionable.
Yeah, it is. It's very precise because of that. Last question. Where's the show going next?
We are going to put a bow on season 1. It'll be 1 full year. And we're making some changes.
Uh-oh, here they come. Big changes.
And a lot of this we did a survey. I want to thank everybody. We had thousands of responses to the survey that we did. We asked you, what do you like most? What do you want more of? We are putting in a segment where we answer some of your questions live on the air. Thank you for going to the site, those of you that have been recording them. Looking forward to that. And we are changing the lightning round.
Wow. We're no longer going to ask what's your color and what's your hair dye.
Stop the tape. They're so good.
They're so good.
Yes. What?
You eat tacos? Wow, they're so good. Pizza? Wow. Thin crust or thick crust? I listen, man.
We are changing the lightning round. Now, I'm not going to tell you.
Don't reveal what it is.
I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is.
No, don't tell us.
But we're excited about it.
Oh, that's very good. All right. I'm excited. All right. We appreciate you. We love what you do. It's amazing work. You're changing lives, and we're so grateful for it.
Thank you. Friends, there it is. I got to tell you, it was awkward sitting in the seat being interviewed. When the host suddenly becomes the target of the interview, everything changes. I want to end this by simply saying thank you. You know, this is our 50th episode. I never imagined that this show would be affecting as many people as it is. When I think back to the first time I sat behind the microphone, the idea was, could we tell a story about a real estate agent with their model? Friends, we've now told 50 of them. The industry has voted. Your show is a #1 winner from Inman, an Innovator of the Year. Your show is the #1 podcast in the real estate space. Your show is trending against all business podcasts. Your show is changing lives. Getting to be the host is one of the greatest honors that I could have. You see, I'm convinced that there are even more models that we need to unpack. I'm convinced that we need to go deeper as we go step by step. I'm convinced that the number of people whose lives we're changing can be 10x'd, and here's why I'm convinced of it. Yesterday, I received an email. It was from a new real estate agent. A new agent who said, Jason, I've been a real estate agent for less than a year. I was getting ready to get out of the real estate business when I stumbled upon your podcast. I can't tell you how much I was touched and how much I was moved to hear somebody like Kimber Menkidi was going through some of the same challenges that I am. I didn't think there was enough hours in the day, and now I'm sure that there is. I'm not getting out of real estate. In fact, I'm doubling down on something that I've always wanted to do. Please thank you and your audience for giving me the strength. I read that email and I almost started crying, but it was the email that I got next that really took me off my feet. It was from a mega agent, someone who does over $200 million a year in production. And the email, which I won't read to you, said the following, and I'm going to paraphrase. Jason, I learned something new on your podcast yesterday that I never knew. Would you mind connecting me to the person that I heard? And it was in that moment that I saw two worlds come into complete focus. This is the place that we unpack the models of the greatest real estate agents in the industry, and we will continue to do it. You are the greatest audience. Simply said, thank you. There it is. That wraps another episode. Friends, I don't know what you're taking out of this. I really don't. I'll tell you what I want you to be taking out of it, which is these are the people that are having tremendously big lives. And the reason it's happening is because they're setting up the models and systems to do just that. Gary Keller told me that leadership is teaching people how to think so that they do the things they need to do when they need to do them, so that ultimately they get the things they want when they want to have them. And that's what I want for you. You're all leaders, but it begins with leading ourselves. If you're enjoying this podcast, I want you to click the subscribe button anywhere that you get your podcasts. We want to be the voice in your head every single week. And every week we're dropping new content. We also send out a newsletter at the conclusion of every show to make sure that you get the highest points in the models and systems that were discussed. So if you want to sign up, I need your name and your email address. Head over to the millionaireagentpodcast.com. millionaireagentpodcast.com. Enter your name and your email address, and every week that newsletter will be in your box. Friends, you just went on a journey. I hope that what happens between now and the next time we meet is absolutely wonderful for you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not KWRI and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information. Warning: you must comply with the TCPA and any other federal, state, or local laws, including for B2B calls and texts. Never call or text a number on any do not call list, and do not use an autodialer or artificial voice or pre-recorded messages without proper consent. Contact your attorney to ensure your compliance.